Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Jim and Rob Overanalyze Movies, the live video podcast for people who are looking for a deeper conversation about the movies we watch and what the movies mean and what they mean to us. All right, and today we got another banger of a show. Today we've got... we haven't done one of these in a while. Does it hold up? And I think we're actually moving into a different era, let's say. So not so much does the movie hold up. It's a classic, Aliens, a classic, a 1986 James Cameron classic. The question we're going to ask ourselves is, is it a damn near perfect movie? I may strongly feel on that subject. All right, but before we get into it, I think it's time to, first of all, bring on our co-host with the most, Mr. Jim Chaboyko. How you doing, my friend? Big cheering for Jim. Oh, wait, we don't need any more of that. How are you doing, my friend?
Good. Happy Easter, everyone. If you'll excuse, I'm just dealing with a little bit of a cold, but got quote tweeted by Patton Oswalt, and
I saw that. I saw it because you sent it to me.
Yep. And I set up my next few days of hoopla and canopy viewing, because if you do it at the last day of the month, you still got 3 days to watch them. So yeah, all kinds of activity on a Easter evening. Yeah.
Jim, you know what? I think we should also let's also welcome our, of course, our good friend Luke Skywalker. Luke, how are you? Welcome to the show. Welcome to the team. How are you feeling about all this?
I have a very bad feeling about this.
Oh, Luke.
Always the negative one. Doesn't want to change the evaporators. Doesn't want to go to the market. Teens,
that tells you.
Youths.
Oh, I guess I should fix my fix that camera setting. You know what? It's always work. Jim and Rob Overanalyze Movies is always a production work in progress.
It's a living document.
Very well said. All right, my friend. To get started on this show, what we're going to do, we are going to get back into watching the trailer. And I think especially as like you say, it's a living document. Let's do that. Let me cue it up here. Let me cue it up, Mr. Jaboyko.
Sounds good.
Just tell me one thing, Burke. You're going out there to destroy them, right? Not to study, not to bring back,
Not to study.
but to wipe them out.
That's the plan.
All right, people, on the ready line. Are you me? Yeah! Are you me? Yeah! Are you? Get on the ready line, Marine! Get something to die! Get on the ready line!
Talk about bad feeling. It's a good idea.
Get your light up here.
Keep back, don't scare her.
Movement! Talk to me, Hudson!
I got signals. I got readings in front and behind.
There's nothing back here.
Look, I'm telling you, there's something moving and it ain't us.
Get them out of there!
They cut the power.
How could they cut the power, man? They're animals. There's movement all over the place. 5 meters, man. 4.
Aliens. This time, it's war.
Well, there you go, my friend. Nothing intense about that.
No, it's pretty chronological too. You don't always get that with trailers, but yeah, it's not exactly, but pretty close.
Yeah. Now, folks, we are going to talk about the trailer and what we remember of it back from the 80s. But if, for whatever reason, the YouTube gods don't think that that's actual fair use, I will put a link to the one we watched, and there'll be a card here, but I'll put a link to it in the description or on a pinned comment somewhere. There'll be a link. Jim, let me ask you this. Cast back into the mid-'80s.
Sure.
And looking at this trailer, what do you think your expectations were of this film before going in?
You know, I think it I think it caught me by surprise. You often, I don't know if I was that cynical about trailers back in the day. I might have even looked forward to them. I mean, the whole Star Wars series is basically the first 3 that were ever released or obviously a trilogy. So, and I remember I was getting into Premiere Magazine and all that kind of thing. I don't remember seeing this in the theater. I think this is maybe a video one for me.
Really?
That year was really busy. I was at Expo 86 a lot of the time. I had gone over to early in the summer, and so was otherwise distracted. But when I did see it, I ended up thinking it was amazing. If memory serves correctly. But
what were your expectations when you like before you went in?
Yeah. With a lot of these army things and a lot of the that posiness that the Bill Paxton character and the Vasquez character, even though it's earned, that doesn't always sort of speak to me personally. So that wouldn't have attracted me. So I guess I might have thought that it would have been a lot of that. Whereas you have a lot of, and that sort of machismo and that sort of thing. Whereas
Posturing.
you do have, and then you have, of course, the counterweight, which is Sigourney Weaver's character, Ellen Ripley. So that sort of and whenever the two clashed, she said, "Look, this is you better
Okay,
listen."
wait.
to me.
What were your
Anyway,
expectations?
my expectation was that it would be sort of a raw, kind of a goofy but fun movie.
Gotcha.
Yeah. How about you? You remember seeing this in the theater itself?
I'm 99% confident I saw it in the theater.
Yeah.
Certainly saw it in videotape after that.
Yeah.
I was in the militia. I was in the reserves. I really was expecting, it's like, wow, is this going to be, I don't think I was expecting a horror movie, Jim. I think I really was expecting a war movie in a way, like a sci-fi war movie. And horror. I'm wondering though, I'm trying to cast back, like my memory is clouded now by the experience with the film. Did I at the time go, oh, it's a sequel. Maybe it's good, maybe it isn't. I'm sure people at the time were asking, who asked for this?
Yeah.
So, yeah, I'm sure, though, I wasn't that discerning. I would have been 19.
Yeah, me too.
Well, I don't know.
Yeah.
Like I did not come with the baggage, good and bad, the baggage I do now to a film.
Good point.
So, yeah, I think I was still expecting a good time at the theater. Mind you, I don't know about you, but I think most of the time it was really hard to have a bad time at the theater or even watching video. I mean, I rented Delta Force. Like this was the time when some really terrible movies were coming out.
How dare you?
Get 10 of them. We'll watch them all night.
Well, I have Kroll on my DVD or PVR right now that I'm just waiting for, let it age a little more like a bottle of scotch. But I've actually heard strong defenses on Twitter for Kroll, so I'll get back to you on that.
All right, Jim, before we move forward, a couple of items. One, everyone, do want to quickly ask you all, if you're in the chat or perhaps watching on replay, to give us a like, a subscribe, maybe a ringy-dingy of the bell. Would really appreciate that. It really does help us, boost the channel. I'll also, Jim, let's take a quick shout out. We've got a busy chat, a very busy chat.
That's awesome. Happy Easter, guys.
We've got, yes. And Jim, I think I can tie this movie into Easter, but we'll wait for the spoiler zone on that one. All right, we've got Walt 65 in the house. We have good to see him from Walt's Flicks Picks. We've got Richard L. That means Katie Fowler is somewhere around as well.
Oh, she put something out too, yeah.
Oh, fantastic. There she is with the alien symbol.
Hey, guys.
Good to see ya. Dragon Movie Guy, of course. You know what? Let's give him the right Dragon Movie Guy. And I also saw Shashank, our man in Chennai, Shashank Vichari. Great to see you here, brother. And I don't know, some Jimbo C guy. All I know is Newt. Anyway, great to see you folks in the chat. And TMG going, a non-jaded Rob went to see this film? Delta Force. I'm not 19 anymore.
Yeah.
I'm not saying, I wouldn't call it jaded Dragon Movie Guy. I would say I have standards now. Enough of that nonsense, though. Jim, before we get into the spoiler zone, just a quick, we got a bigger question. We got a number of big questions coming up. But right now, is this is Aliens a see it or skip it for you, my friend?
Go see it. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, ditto. Couldn't agree more. All right, that means we are getting into the spoiler zone, everybody. And I guess for now, Jim, why don't you kick us off?
Sure.
Tell us what you think makes this movie work. Tell us why you think it's a see it. At the very least, it's a definite see it. We'll get into the perfection part later, but
Yeah. I think it's really going into it. I just noticed there wasn't a lot of, you didn't have to go through a lot of stuff to get to where you're going. Like this movie has an obvious goal, like to get you to these scary places. To that end, there's not a lot of build up. We did have some character. This is sort of how I guess the best case scenario for a sequel, because you do build on that earlier story, but it's not a make work project. Like it feels like a natural progression. So you have all that stuff about Ripley, you know what she's capable of. You can also sort of see what she is expecting in a mission, or that she knows what to look for. Perfect example is her reaction between androids and her ability to eventually trust the Lance Henriksen Bishop. Anyway, but it really it's
character growth.
It really gets down to business. There's not even a lot of music. Like you're just there, and it's very dark and serious, and what's the word? It's very work oriented. Basically, it's just going forward, and there's a sort of a no funny business aspect to this. I think I just think it was very. I think Cameron had sort of a respect, even though it's a space horror movie. I think he had respect for the material and just sent you right on into it. And it didn't take many prisoners. So
it's a great. I like that, and you're absolutely right. Interestingly enough, as you're talking about it, it was like, this is a 2.25 hour movie. Like it is not it's no short ass movie. It's no even 2 hour movie. It's 2.25 hours, but at no time do you feel, oh, when are we going to get to the fireworks factory?
Yeah.
You really do feel that idea of momentum. Even in what would otherwise be just laying some pipe early on, some exposition early on, that at the Earth base after she's been recovered, finds out it's 57 years later, it's like, no, this is important. There's conflict. There's things going on. And she is a woman, even when she's saying no, she's a woman who's doing stuff.
Yeah.
Which I think is, you're absolutely right.
Yeah, and the interesting thing about the timing too, because I sort of had an eye on the clock, because we were watching it on off our HBO Crave, which is Stars actually. But anyway, it's almost right at the hour mark that things go to shit.
Also on Disney.
Oh yeah, no kidding. Those Disney folks, always so predictable. Yeah, so the right on the hour, everything goes down, and then with that last, the space station will self-destruct in 15 minutes. They have timed it, like it's pretty much on the nose. So that's kind of neat.
Neat little note. Walt65 says in the chat, it was relentless, same way the first Terminator was. And, we should do Terminator 2.
Another good.
Work on some of James Cameron's sequels. I mean, we didn't like the last big sequel he made, and another one. This is just a bug in your ear for now, Jim. Shashank is asking us what are our favorite James Cameron movies. Let's see if we can't answer that at the end of this conversation.
Yeah.
What did you think they did? And I sent you a link, and folks, I will put a card to it up here. There were a number of deleted scenes. I think the only really important one was a scene that we learned that not only does Ripley have an 11-year-old child that she promised to get home by, but of course the child is now, turned into an old woman and died before she got there. All the other stuff was almost like extra fluff. It was, maybe a bit of on the planet stuff before they ever get there, and some stuff that goes on during the main course of the action. Well, first of all, would you agree with me that everything they cut were good cuts?
Yeah, I mean, you don't really need. You don't really. They showed some activity in the colony, which they call it, and the whole setup of the colonizers. It turns out like they're almost like prospectors, so they would send a whole family in. So anyway, that just sort of added a whole kind of element. And they'd go mining their patch or looking for things. You see Newt with her family, but yeah, it's sort of extra stuff. I think it's fan stuff. It'd be nice to have that option to watch that version, but I think the most important thing and the weirdest thing that they cut out too was talk about her own family and her own daughter. Was there anything else? I mean, it was interesting. I found it interesting, and I'm always for adding some of the cut scenes, but I can't say the whole thing was completely. But that I think you're right, is that the one that they should have included was her talk about the daughter. It made for a neat scene, and Paul
Jim,
Reiser.
I'm not saying that. I think that was a great cut. That was a key cut.
Yeah.
I think that was a really important cut, an important cut, and a right cut. I think all these cuts were good cuts.
Yeah.
And I think if they included that, it would have. And I'll get into why I think that would have been a problem, but so you feel, though, correct me if I'm wrong, before I cut you off there, I was mostly correcting what you thought I thought, but you feel that would have been a good one to keep in.
It didn't. Yeah, I mean, it sort of added a little bit to it. Sort of what it did was it added a bit to her story, but also changed her relation to Newt. Like it sort of it magnified what Newt meant to her, and if you it's not a romantic movie.
And then the scene at the end, "Mommy."
Yeah, there's no romance here. Like there is famously in Terminator, but there's it hints. There's an SNL sketch where Pete Davidson's watching the movie with his parents, and that scene actually goes on for 15 minutes when in reality it's about a minute. Anyway, there's the family that's hinted at. Michael Biehn, Newt, and kind of hinted at. You can sort of see a little bit of something at work there.
Yeah.
But she kisses her cat, Jonesy, and she kisses Newt in an affectionate way, and those are the two things that she most connects with. And I think mentioning the daughter sort of highlights that fact that she perhaps needs to connect with someone.
Well, Jim, I think. Whoopsie. For myself and Luke in the or Luke.
Luke, what did Luke think?
Not you, Luke. I wasn't talking to you.
But I was going into Toshi Station to pick up some power converters.
Well,
answer the question.
You go into go get those power converters. Where was I, Jim?
About the cut.
The cut. Walt says felt the longer cut doesn't work as well. He feels the trimmer theatrical cut is sharper. But I think here's the why I think it works better without it is if you have that mother thing, then all of a sudden you're kind of competing the character, what the character wants, what the movie's really about. All of a sudden you just got two things. Is it about lost motherhood? Like, and I'm talking about the emotional story. I think the log line I wrote for it, not the log line that came from the studio, but the log line I sort of wrote in my my diary. Well, actually, I have the thing. I might as well as read. Let us refer to the actual written record. Oh my goodness. Where are we here? Ah, there we go. Aliens. And I had to tape in an extra piece because
Oh my
allowed
gosh.
for so much. Okay, so here's the log line I wrote after watching it. Riley returns to LV-426. What great.
Short
I love the
for
way it
Las,
even sounds.
short for Las
Ridley.
Vegas, Brian.
Riley. Ridley returns to LV-426 with a squad of Marines to face her fears and ensure that there aren't any aliens, only to find the colony overrun with them. But emotionally, it can either be about her and motherhood or about her overcoming her fears. And I think rightly so, when they look at it and they can kind of go, well, we can have this thing about motherhood, or we can have it about her terror. The fact that she's this woman who has gone through this horrible trauma is, and you can see it in the first half of the movie. Before that midpoint, Jim, she is skittish. She can't sleep. She is a bit of a wreck. And when she's trying to brief the Marines, she's getting choked up and she's getting upset, you know? And so I think that's the emotional core. It's about this woman overcoming it and finding something. In a way, here, Jim, is my hook into the Paschal weekend, the Easter weekend.
Okay.
She is a woman living but dead, wrapped up in this horror, and then she goes down into the deep that is LV-426 and comes out alive with something else to live for. And Newt does that, and you do not need her to have lost a child to want to be a mother to this child. Yeah. And I think it actually takes away thematically from some of the other awesome things that were going on in this film, which I'm not going to say, Jim, is necessarily a feminist film, but let's say feminist adjacent, feminist friendly, so that's on a storytelling way. I think that was a good call. Otherwise, this is just a really well-paced, well-told story. Things are set up, payoff, building up to a big midpoint, like a big solid midpoint. And then everything's downhill after that. Like, it's just some great storytelling. But I also think, and maybe this is a question I'll put to you, I'll put out to the chat before I kind of elaborate on how I feel about this, but would you agree with me? Like, I don't want to say it's the best film. I want to put it in like a class. But we gotta start defining that class, a damn near perfect movie. And I think one of those things should be that the film, in some way, it doesn't have to be some revolutionary thing like Rose's War that you sent me, Baltimore, as it was released on the festival circuit, or Norma Ray. But it should be kind of challenging the status quo. And I'll get into why I think this thing challenges the status quo in a sec. But at the very least, it should be a very well-told story. Does either of those things make sense to you as far as creating a class called a damn near perfect movie?
Yeah, I mean, I'm still sort of working on a few things, ways that I would sort of classify that. I think on second viewing, you're going to be looking for different things. Like the first time you watch something, for this category. It's possibly one characteristic is not knowing how it's going to end, like a certain lack of predictability. Although predictability is very nice sometimes, other times it's nice to be going to like I don't anyway. So there's
Would that be though
other
part
ways
of a well-told story? We all know where they're going to end. We always kind of know. Okay, I know what's gonna end here. You didn't go into Star Wars. You didn't need to be an expert to go into Star Wars and go, boy, I think that boy's gonna make it out.
He's gonna be killed in the first 20 minutes. The big Jawa thing is just gonna go boom, right on him. Wait, that sandbank isn't.
It's not shored up properly.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so back to you.
So the characteristics of a damn near perfect movie. Those would both work, I think.
Yeah. What about that idea of being at least, challenging the status quo?
Yeah.
And I think this is why I'm thinking about this. I think The King's Speech is a really well-made movie. That's a bit of nice filmmaking, nice storytelling. But, I mean, okay, Donald Trump might challenge us on this, but everyone kind of knows, hey, don't make fun of people who stutter. It's like, I can't say that movie really challenges the status quo. It's like, will this man born to wealth and privilege somehow will it work out for this white man born to immense wealth and privilege?
Yeah.
Yes, it does.
Poor guy. He feels low.
Yeah. All right. Well, coming back to this movie, and let me share a bit of, coming back into one of the things I think that does make this film different, and one of the things I learned from this film, and only in the watching this weekend, Jim. But I think it's important to share this because there's a part of me is like kind of, I don't know if James Cameron's a dick or not, but I have, to my everlasting shame, and if I ever run into this woman, it'll be the first thing that comes out of my mouth. I remember having coffee with a friend of mine. We haven't spoken in years, but the vicissitudes of life. But we're having coffee, and I had bumped into another woman on my way in, and I went on like for half the coffee, Jim. I went on about how that woman is way too attractive to be that pissed off. And I'm not saying the woman was pissed off at me because we bumped into each other. I think she was just, we can all have a bad day. But I somehow said, I didn't say it to her. I said it to my friend. She's too pretty to not smile. And I didn't say this when I was 20, Jim. Yeah. I said this when I was in my early 40s. Now, mind you, I was not in my best place at the time, but my everlasting shame. I'm sure I've done other sexist shit, but this one kind of sticks out at me. Whereas, and this is where this film comes into play, Jim, I swear to God, I'll bring this home. Here's the first time I realized that there is a James Cameron man. And Michael Biehn has played a few of them. Played it in Terminator. Played it in this film. And if you watch this film, of all the, you talked about posturing in that. For all the douchiness of some of the troops, it's never gender related. But they don't respect her. They don't listen to her. They call her a princess. They don't listen to her. And that first half of the movie is almost about her trying to earn respect, even as she's trying to cope with the trauma and dealing with being in this kind of place again. A base that looks very much like the Nostromo. Bean's character, Hicks, is the only one who listens to her, asks her questions, and before the midpoint, when everything goes literally, let me see, literally to she's the one who's like, I think we should do this. And Hicks, now the one in charge, is actually listens to her, doesn't, listens to her, processes that, moves on. And I think that it was really kind of like why, and I'll take it further, Jim. If I look at Avatar, I think one of the reasons I barely remember the first Avatar, even though it's a well-told movie, it's really not, the character doesn't grow much. The Scully in that, it's he falls in love with a local girl and decides to switch sides, but he wasn't a bad guy who changed. Or he wasn't like, he was dealing with a physical trauma, but not really as much an emotional one. He doesn't have an inner need he's dealing with. And I think that's because he's also a James Cameron man. And they are great supporting characters, especially great supporting characters. And I'm thinking of who's the Leonardo DiCaprio plays him in. There's Rose and Jack.
Oh, Titanic.
That's it, in Titanic. Also, a great supporting character. Has no arc himself. Is really there to support the woman character, the lead woman character, as she goes through her emotional journey. And he could be a shit, just as I was a shit to that woman. It's like, and points to her, although I bet you, well, the 1 in 10 women who watch our stream will go, yes, we've all listened to men like you, Rob, and you're lucky we like you. It's the only reason we put up with it, is when you come out with some of this horse shit. But yeah, I think that was new. This is 1986, a war movie. And you're right, Jim. You don't see any of that posturing, the masculine, macho posturing. You don't see that in this film. You do see the, let's say, what you might call alpha male behavior, even in one of the women characters, but they're not fighting for control or something. And it's really not, we don't see a lot of dominance behavior.
Yeah.
And I think that, especially for a mid-'80s movie, is noteworthy, especially a mid-'80s movie that steals a lot of tropes from Vietnam War movies and war movies in general. So yeah, that's kind of, these are the things that I thought of as I was watching Aliens of all things.
Yeah, another one of the nice things, and it was left unsaid, and I couldn't remember every line, of course, but I half expected Bean's character to say, hey, you'd make a good soldier, or something to that effect, because the skills that she showed, her decisiveness, her knowledge of how to handle situations and that sort of thing, and her ability to take charge and suggest things. She was probably a better soldier than, I mean, let's not gloss over the fact that they lost two-thirds of their troops in the first few minutes of exploring, in what is sort of just a go and find out kind of recon mission. They were essentially wiped out, including the sergeant. There's an admiration there, and they don't actually verbalize it, which is kind of nice. You don't have to say every thought that comes through the characters' heads necessarily, but
here's a DMG. Further to my point here, DMG makes a comment in the chat. He's like, Alien, SIC, was able to make an intimidating villain. Maybe not intimidating, but a villain out of Paul Reiser.
Yeah.
And set up one of the best lines in a movie like this. I don't know which is worse, you or them. So you don't see them screwing each other over for a percentage. What a great line. But let me put
Oh,
this
yeah.
to you. That's exactly it. They don't do that. Oh, you'd be a good one of the guys. They don't do that.
No,
And I
it's
think
pretty
that's
subtle in a lot
I
of
think
ways.
that's a positive thing. That it isn't, oh, you could be an honorary man. Not playing that. There's even, and yes, there's no romance here, but there is what I think is remarkable, because I mean, in so many of these movies, especially with the big heavy guns and the focus on guns,
Mhm.
there's almost some weird kind of sexual thing going on there, and it's always kind of creeps me out a little.
Mhm.
They have this moment where Michael Bean Hicks is helping Ridley, screw that up. He's helping Ripley
Ellen.
with with here, let me introduce you to my friend here, blah blah, the M42, yada yada yada, which is a super guy moment. But I'll be damned, the way Sigourney Weaver, the choices she made, but also the direction, the camera angle, everything, it's a synthesis of many factors, of many ingredients. But there is a moment where she gives him a look of like, I know what you're doing, but I'm good with it. Where it's like, this is kind of, not hot, but this is a little sexy.
Yeah.
It's also a nice little moment of, okay, we're a breather. We've
Yeah.
just been through a lot of intense stuff, but it's a little hot, and it's not necessarily, and now we're going to stroke this gun like some weird, like it was a great little moment. And I think, yeah, you're right, because they pull back on that stuff. It isn't for all the hits they make on these moments, they really pull back to I like the way you put it, Jim, a lot of times, let it breathe.
Yeah, and then in a lot of these moments, and it sounds strange saying this, but Aliens takes the subtle route. Like Paul Reiser's villain he's not, a mustache. He never mocks them. He's never, there's a little bit of superiority there too, but there's never any, he doesn't have that attitude. Right.
Yeah.
And he's pretty subtle. I mean, he gets a bit sweaty at the end when looks like they're gonna summarily execute him. But he's become a liability, and you can't trust the guy. But there's not a lot like mwahaha, and he never lords above them like so
No.
many other villains. He's just a quiet little dirtbag. And he would absolutely kill these people. He's a sociopath, but whether or not they were in their sleep or whatever.
Yeah.
The other subtle thing
But
I like.
thing is, I think part of that is going back, Jim. He supports Ripley as in the up to the midpoint, as that kind of rising to the climax, let's say. When she pulls him up, when she pulls Gorman, the poor Gormless Lieutenant Gorman, pulls him out, and it's Reiser. Yeah, you're done. Like, he recognizes and doesn't interfere. He's actually, in the first half of the movie, supportive.
Yeah.
He's on her side. Like, I mean, he's thinking about his percentage, but he is on her side in the inquiry at the beginning. And I think that's part of what makes him work, and his treachery and his finkiness all the worse in the second half of the movie, because it's like, oh my God, you are f***ing terrible.
Yeah.
I thought you were a good guy.
And you hate him, but he hasn't done a lot, his actions, of course, but he doesn't do a lot of that other typical movie villain stuff.
Not one twirl of the non-existent mustache. No evil flourish.
I was going to say the other subtlety I liked was that little scene between the Queen alien and Ripley, when she basically mimed that I'll fry your eggs here if you don't let me And so the alien goes, and all her guards back up.
Yeah.
And then she sort of tries to get the drop on Ripley, and Ripley just does this. Just tilts her head. It's in the trailer.
Yeah.
It's in that trailer we watched. And it's such an awesome little, like, come on. And
it's a great
that's
cue.
it. Bam. Yeah, I know. It's so in a lot of ways, this thing with Bill Paxton screaming, this is a pretty subtle movie.
Yeah. Well, and even that part it adds to it does add to the subtlety. You have somebody going through a hard time, kind of having a meltdown.
Yeah.
And how it amps up others. But I think, again, it all goes to, because Hudson, the Hudson character is the way he is, because Apone's been killed and Gorman's out of action. Once it all goes sideways and Hudson is melting down again, this is when Ripley, it really is that post midpoint change where she takes over, and not in a big way. She's literally says, I need you to do this. And she just takes over, and everyone's like, well, guess she's in charge, and they just roll. And Michael Biehn, again, the James Cameron man, was like, well, okay, I guess you're in charge now, because he wasn't too confident before. Like, he wasn't unconfident, but, a guy who knew his role, a supporting player.
And he's a corporal.
So after that midpoint, when she takes over, she's running the show, no pushback. No pushback from anyone. And that is part of her arc. And again, a great moment for a James Cameron woman character.
Mm-hmm. And earned and organic, and it felt great, and you could see it because when you realize it's happening, it's kind of fascinating. Little example of group dynamics. Yeah,
it's like a great cut, a really good cut, and it's like, wait a sec, there is a cut there. I don't see it even as I'm watching it happening frame by frame. That's a perfect cut, and that is a perfect character change, that when she takes over totally makes sense, even though that is not the woman we started with nightmares and getting angry, losing her in the meeting, in the inquiry, did IQ suddenly drop while I was gone?
Yeah.
Nope, this is a woman who's totally in charge, totally possessed of herself. The only other time she melts down, which is appropriate from a storytelling perspective, is when she thinks she's lost Newt.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then, again, Michael Hicks, the perfect Cameron man, that's the only time I wouldn't even call it manhandling her. It's like, okay, I've got to take control for a bit here. I'm still on your side, but I need you to calm down for a bit, but not, all right, women be crazy, be crazy. And so you have that moment because you have that character meltdown, and then she regathers herself for the final push, which is because even the goal has changed. Just as she's changed, the goal has changed. The goal at the second half of the movie is just, let's get off this rock. Never mind revenge. Never mind overcoming your fears. We need to get out of here.
Survive.
And we need to get out of here with this child.
Yeah.
Is there anything else that kind of moved you, Jim? Like I had a number of moments where I'm like, God damn, this is getting me here. Any moments that moved you in particular that after we've talked about it now that you're like, wow, that had a heavier hit than I thought it was.
Yeah, I think we've covered a number of them, the ones that I was going to mention. I did like a couple of the quieter scenes. Like that's the other thing, is that it's not just, it is relentless, but it does take, time-wise, the mission that they're on, going to the planet and running away from the planet, I don't think is maybe a day or something. I'm not sure. But there's some quiet moments in there where people are allowed to talk. Ripley puts Newt to bed, that sort of thing. And I thought that was very well handled.
You
And
mean
just
you mean the part where she put her to bed so that
Paul.
Carter Burke can.
Yeah.
Thank you. This is convenient.
Yeah, exactly. But that was sort of a nice little scene there. I think they take their time to humanize the characters, which is good. And I can see, it uses its minutes well. Well, you did say it's over 2 hours, 2 hours and 17, which is the cut that we watched. But it used its time very well. And I sort of wish that there was and this is a whole other kettle of fish. I sort of wish there was a third movie that was as rewarding as this one, something that would go nicely into a third. But I don't.
Yeah.
And then you're set up and you have some survivors. What can possibly happen? And apparently William Gibson wrote a version that they didn't like, and da 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 da. So we're stuck with the 2 hours and 17 minutes of this one, and we can always revisit it.
That's an interesting point, and I think that's a perfect time to sort of, let's say, talk about, kind of hook into our own end game of sorts. But there are a couple of questions in the chat.
Oh yeah, sure.
One of it's a comment, and then I kind of responded to it. Walt65 says, "Riser is clearly Cameron's swipe at modern corporations in general," and I was like, I do agree with them. Although I think Alien also kind of had that. It was the company it's forever the company sending people down into horrifically dangerous places.
Yeah.
Go check that out for us. Here's my question I put to Walt in the chat, and I'll put to you now, Jim. Well, first of all, do you agree with Walt? And do you think that particular component was ahead of its time, or with the times, or perhaps with all times? That critique of the soulless corporation. There's the way I describe it. It sounds like a stock character.
Yeah. I the 70s had its counterculture kind of aspect to it. Yeah, it's a hard one because you have to sort of cast your mind back. It seems more prevalent today. The more we rely on corporations, the more we sort of criticize them as well, because they're all over. But yeah, that's a hard one. But in terms of a mainstream science fiction movie, I would. It's a pretty big vehicle for sort of corporation criticism. Kind of interesting too. I didn't notice as many references to Wayland Yutani, and some of the cutscenes had obvious like word marks and logos, and a child, rides a big wheel, and the camera sort of pans and it shows you the WY,
which I laughed because it's like, no.
A little bit on the nose.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
They'll even brand their toys.
Yeah. It was on the toy too. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah,
that's right. Yeah.
Well,
But there was also one on the wall, so the kid goes by and it's on the wall there.
Yeah.
So I
why was that cut?
you don't see the same kind of. Would you see any kind of like that kind of criticism in something like, say, Die Hard, or I don't think you do, but and it's obvious here, right?
I'm wondering though, is maybe it's a science fiction trope.
Yeah.
Like just putting it out there. All right, Jim, I want to kind of go back to the start, but sort of revamp the question. But before I do that, folks, I will once again beg you all for a like, a subscribe, and perhaps maybe ringy-ding that bell. We would really appreciate it. It does help us get the word out about the channel. And we are excited about a couple of shows that are coming up, including from an indie, who I heard from today, an indie British filmmaker who's got an exciting show. It's even on Tubi. Anyway, well, more about that later. Jim, my original, let's say my overarching question here was, is this a damn near perfect movie? We've only started to kind of define that. We've got, let's say, 2, 3, maybe criteria right now. 1, just a well-made movie. 2, an unexpected end that still makes sense. And then 3, if you'll give me this one, I think it does, it can't bolster, but it should question the status quo, question in some way, shape, or form the conventional wisdom of the time. Based on those 3 criteria, if you'll give me those 3, is this a damn near perfect movie? And if it isn't, why not? Is there another criteria you go, yeah, I don't care? I don't know. What do you think?
I mean, simply from a,
and that goes to everyone in the chat as well.
From a purely cinematic experience, I'd say it's perfect. I mean, if you sat down and wrote a thesis about it, maybe you'd find some fault, but no, I think it's a damn near perfect movie.
I am gonna let me agree with you, Jim.
Whoa.
I do think it's a damn near perfect movie. I am surprised. I'm really surprised though at how smarter a film this is than I thought it was. And I always thought it was a great movie, but that there's something deeper going on here without it being, say, I think, radical like the zone of interest is. But there's still something deep that it holds up. There's still universal themes here. It is about someone overcoming her fears. We can see ourselves in Ripley. Well, you know what? You're not questioning her. She is a woman. She is a woman. There's a femininity to her, just as Hicks is a masculine guy, like but somebody where you can kind of go, oh boy, if you turned out like that character did, I'd feel like I've done my job as a parent, and that's pretty cool. Almost 40 years later,
Jesus,
that even the effects, you can tell, especially on a 4K television, if you're not seeing something remastered and massaged to fit the new standard, the new home video standard. Yeah, there are times when it's like it's showing its age, but not a lot.
No.
But I think really in the end, it's that great storytelling. All those pieces come together into something where I'm like, wow. And first time, Jim, I can really say I've like, as we have, and it's only taken, we're about to get into our 5th year. It's only taken me 4 years to kind of go, wow, I think I really had an insight about a filmmaker. And yeah, all from, of all things, aliens.
Yeah.
So yes, damn near perfect film. Jim, is there any final thoughts you want to add before we say goodbye to our wonderful chat?
Yeah, I had several. I did want to
Slow
mention,
down, baby.
there's a charm to some of the effects, especially that. Would it be a green screen? There's another word for it, and it's not quite the painted background, but there's several
Matte.
scene
Matte
matte. Yeah, I guess it would be a
paintings. Yeah,
matte.
matte.
But it's
Yep.
also the explosion of the ship is obviously sort of projected behind them. There's about 3
Yeah.
occasions.
Yeah.
I thought it was charming. Like I kind of dig that. It's almost like watching rotoscoping or something like
Yeah.
of another age. And yet at the same time, it doesn't take you out of it. So it's its own thing that I think you
I
can
know
take
that
pleasure in.
it's that midpoint. Oh my God, we're really screwed because the drop ship has blown
Yes.
up,
Yes,
and
yeah.
they are, and you're like, that's rear projection.
Rear projection. That was the phrase. Yeah. I loved it. I thought it totally worked. And, I'm sort of, open to that. Maybe the kids these days wouldn't, but, so that was one thing. The other thing that I wanted to mention, and it's not just I'm not just looking for an easy line here. When Gorman, the lieutenant, the sort of, book smart, but not street smart lieutenant,
Yep.
he started speaking and he had a nasal
Inexperienced.
voice,
Yeah.
and yet he felt the need to sort of order people around, and he didn't really explain some of his thinking. I thought, who does this remind me of? And the only thing I could think of is I thought maybe others think this too. Does he remind you perhaps of the current leader of the Canadian Conservative Party? And I'm not joking. Like that's not just an easy dig. I thought, holy crap, he reminds me of PP. So that was that. That was one of my insights.
You know who he reminded me of? Even while one of the great things about it's not a Vietnam War movie. It's not an allegory, but they do take motifs, tropes from those movies, including Gorman, who is the what had become by then a stock character in Vietnam War movies, the lieutenant who is not prepared for the job and isn't up to the task. What he reminded me of, and this is a bit more of my own personal sharing, is that first time you're in charge of people and all of a sudden everything's about, oh, you're challenging my authority, and you're just nervous because you've never done it, you haven't relaxed, you're not Apone. Sergeant Apone, who's totally like, oh, you heard the boss and this is what we're going to do. The one who's really in charge of everyone. Because once he dies, that whole group falls apart, even though they technically have a commander. You know?
Yeah. So there was that. The other two things I just wanted to point out was
wait.
Cool.
He's like every other assistant manager who just got the job at a fast food joint at a McDonald's. 19 and put in charge of the
exactly.
of 16-year-olds. Oh, that's going to work out well.
With a completely clean apron, never been used, still in its original wrapper. The other little 2 points I wanted to make was I thought the Lance Henriksen character of Bishop as the robot. I don't know if you can sort of credit a guy for playing a robot, but again, subtle and it's sort of endearing. And one of the changes that happens is that her ability to be able to trust him in this fairly short period. As opposed to her relationship with the Ian Holm robot character in the first one, that was a kind of an interesting arc to watch as well. And if you watch when she retrieves his body, she retrieves both of them and both parts because the aliens ripped him in half. He's still functional, but she's put him away, together with a little bit of respect. I think that was a nice little touch.
That's a great point.
And the last one is I want to give a shout out to the true hero of this movie, welding, the art of welding. There's so much welding in this movie. There's welding and unwelding. The first 2 minutes, there's a minute of the shot is a big weld, and it follows the course of the whole door. You're talking about, efficiency in filmmaking, and I don't have any quibbles. If you follow as it goes, and makes a bit of a hexagon, and then finally punches through when they're trying to get into Ripley's descent rocket. If I found out that this was
genius,
paid by the Welding Corporation or the Junior Welding Educator Association of America at the time, I would not be surprised. A small financial donation or something.
And totally kind of emphasizes and changes your idea. Is it Chekhov's gun or is it Chekhov's plasma welder, plasma cutter?
There's slow times and there's action times and you have to weld fast and
and also the way they do it in that very first scene, the first shot, well, almost the first shot, the third or fourth shot, is also sets mood and tension.
Yeah.
Because we're that going all the way around, what's going on, what's behind the door, what's happening. It's just, it's a great mood setter and tension builder.
Yeah. And takes its time too, which a lot of the rest of the movie does. It sort of does take its time
and makes me wonder if the Phantom Menace or did they take this out of Star Wars? Because Star Wars had a, boom at the very beginning of Star Wars.
Yeah. That's true too.
How many of these little motifs are being passed from one movie to the other? That's a great one. Now, when I think of Chekhov's gun, I'm going to go, don't forget the plasma cutter.
Yeah, exactly.
What about welding?
I'm surprised there wasn't a designated
Chekhov's
welding character.
TIG welder or DMG actually has got a couple. Of course, count on DMG, the Dwight Schrute of Aliens. But here's an interesting piece. He mentions I did laugh at the 80s of it all with the fear of Japanese companies taking over America.
Good point.
Which was an 80s thing. You're absolutely right. Wayland Yutani Aliens, No Katami and Die Hard, etc. So that's a great observation. Myself, Jim, you know what? This is such a good movie. It really does. It makes me think, and this is, I'll leave it at this. This is a film, especially as it's owned by Disney somehow through, 20th Century Fox. This is a film that I have to get on physical media. I want the Blu-ray because I don't want them changing something. I want it in my library.
Yeah.
I think it's that good. It is damn near a perfect movie, and I don't see that changing anytime soon. Just a quick just a quick goodbye to everyone in the chat. We got Walt65, Dragon Movie Guy, Shashank Vachari, great fellow YouTubers of ours. We've Richard L, Katie Fowler. Katie. Thank you all so much for coming. Please do not forget to subscribe, and ding that bell.